Okay, welcome to the finance committee meeting. And go ahead, do approval of the agenda. Got a
So moved that we approve the agenda.
second, agenda approved. All right, and do we have any public comments on agenda items? Hearing none? Yep, go ahead and do the FY 2026 budget process review.
We don't have a lot to update. I know that you all had the board advance a couple of weeks ago. I'll say for that. But I know that Tina covered a lot of the process there. So this is kind of we just wanted to update you, do a review and give you a chance to ask any questions. As you know, we start with governor's budget requests in the fall. This is just a quick review of what's happening in Columbia right now. That moves into Ways and Means. The Ways and Means full committee budget came out last week. So we have a little bit of information. We move on to the next slide on that. Unfortunately, the projections that come along with that, budget, we don't see those numbers until around the middle of March, typically. We have a conference next week where we'll get an update from legislation and legislative committees and the State Department of Education. But typically they don't have the numbers that go along with any of that until about a week or two later. So, and that's our first look at what we may get as a district, because as updated a couple of years ago, we're not really able to predict because it's based on our proportion to the whole state. We don't know what their piece is, so I have to wait on that.
You know, we used to get a per pupil.
So,
Are you able, for the purposes of just getting started and whatnot, able to use last year's projections just as a starting point?
We can, our last year's projections, current year projections were adjusted already for our 45th day because our student count was lower than the 45th day was lower than the 135th day. So it's not going to be solid numbers, but we can at least have a starting point. Working on the red expenditure side, which we'll get to that in just a second.
so after Ways and Means, it then moves to the Senate, and then from the Senate, it gets given to the governor. He can veto if he wants to, and then he'll ultimately sign it into law most of the time, but him, which is what we need to start connecting. So things are changing, and they're going to continue to change for the next 3 months. Just a couple of examples. The governor's budget request was submitted on the 13th of January. And that budget recommended increasing the minimum starting teacher salary from 47,000 to 50,000. So an increase of 3,000. When the Ways and Means budget came out last week, their increase they dropped that to a $1,500 increase to raise it from 47,000 to 48,500. Now it could go to the Senate. The Senate could change it again. If that happens, then there's a conference committee and they need to agree, and then that goes to the governor. So there's still lots of opportunities for change between now and then. Other thing that was slightly different, the beginning of the week last week, we heard that the state health insurance plan was going to raise the employer premiums by 4.6%, but no increase to subscribers. So no increase to employees. By the end of the week, the House Ways and Means came out and they said, we are increasing 4.6%, but we're also going to increase for employees $36.76 a month, which comes out to about $441 a year. People on the base plan.
Do you remember when was the last time they had like a substantial increase?
Subscriber increase has been
It's been a while.
Just on the employer side.
Yeah, I mean, that's just a lot for people.
Yeah, it is.
What's the portion increase gonna look like?
That's about $1 million for us.
Last year it was 11%. So last year was 11%. This year is 4%. So employer keeps getting costs.
So that's kind of what's happening at the state, and it's ever changing for the next several months. And then we're also kind of at the beginning of the process here. We are collecting and compiling requests based on needs It's based on enrollment, population within enrollment. We're collecting, budget requests. We will meet to discuss those, vet them, refine them.
Since this is new, you Jim, so what we have done is we started the allocations meetings. Katie said over there, so our academic team meets with our principals based on their enrollment, based on their forecasted enrollment. Then they make the specific request. Now, special ed is a little different because it's based on, condition and the number of those identified students. So that it works a little differently. They are funded out of SPED, but only 60%? About 60% of that. So we pick up a big portion of the SPED staff as well. So, but those conversations have already started. We're getting close to a first look with them on allocations based on our forecasted enrollment for next year.
So that's on the expenditure side of the district, and on the revenue side, we're starting to collect that information as well. We'll meet with the county soon to get a projection on local taxes, and that will be the biggest other piece that we need to start being able to project.
Biggest piece is state revenues. So we're kind of at their mercy.
In March, we think we have a preliminary projection in March, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Middle of March though, which is unfortunate because our next board workshop is March 10th. So I don't know that we will have good revenue projections. Well, we won't have revenue projection.
Their value, push that on.
I would say.
I mean, you
Yeah.
can modify
I would
this.
too, because we're not gonna have a
No,
lot
I
more
mean,
information.
that
That
would be
the
mad.
point.
I agree.
Yeah.
What we've done in the past with that March 10th workshop was give you a first look. And so we've had the board advance where we were talking about that in this meeting. So we've kind of given you first looks and first talks.
So I just modify that date. Now we have spring break. Right.
Let's see. Spring break is at the end of that month, so we don't have another March board meeting unless y'all want to meet on top board meeting.
There's the 17th or the 31st. 31st is the last Monday in March.
Yeah, we can see if we till we get the numbers.
But when it's.
Spring break's the 24th, the week of the 24th. So yeah, I guess that's the day we come back. You want to push it to April, but
Like exclamation point.
we're gonna have one in April anyway, aren't we? 14th, yes.
I just don't know what
7th
value
might
there'd be
cheaper.
if you don't have revenue projections.
So, I mean, really, do you think 31st, first or second would be a problem?
We're gonna be working on the expenditure side, so it'll really be just putting revenues in there if we want to do first look at expenditures.
Do it. Jump right in. Not even full stay, or do you want to say? We can see that I'm not as well, and not leaving Evan, but I do have Evan and Jim, Which we all,
Can you do March
make sure y'all
31st?
can be there, because
I
y'all.
can, but prior to that, given you've heard some of this commentary before
That's
in
okay.
the conversation, so will we have any projections? I know they're not final, but you've got all these people that have thrown some sort of projections in there. And as I said before, the whole calendar, you guys are doing a great job trying to work in what is an upside down way of budgeting, at least to me. And so everything's being pushed off to the last minute. And so I'm looking at this from the very back. And if we have to be prepared to approve a budget in early June, which is out of sync with what county council's doing in their budgeting, and everything else, which is out of sync with everything else upstream at the state level and getting projections. At some point, you just have to nail a stake in the ground and say, this is what we're going on based on this assumption. Okay, this assumption could be plus or minus 10%. It could be plus or minus 100%. I don't care what it is. Just tell us what it is. So we can start to have discussions about, well, based on this projection, we're gonna have to really scramble over here and figure out what we can do. Or based on this, it's like, yeah, maybe it's not gonna be as bad as we thought. So, okay, I feel a little more confident we can go through this. Because people are gonna be asking questions. We have a compressed timeline to do. And it's, again, coming from the outside in, doing the board and everything, just want to kind of understand, do we have anything we can hang a hat on, understanding that it's an assumption, can't hold you to it, because you're dependent on what the state tells you. You're dependent on what county tells us from a local revenue standpoint.
we would feel better, after we meet with the county and, hypotheticals from the state and after we go to our conference with the legislators in the State Department next week. So that following week, we don't have our schedule yet from the county. That's going to be a big piece as well. What do you think? I still feel like March 31st might be the best time for us to try
It
to.
could be like pending, I guess, you get the numbers. We don't
I mean,
even-
To your point, we'll have a general idea by then.
Right.
So, and we usually do anyway. We have worst and best case scenarios. We don't overstaff, so that'll help us a little bit. We probably overstaffed a little bit this year, but I mean, we came out okay, even with big raises. So, I mean, because we didn't hit our forecast. But again, we don't know what next year brings. Everybody I've talked to locally has said they felt like construction slowed down a little bit, waiting for the election. The election took place and interest rates start to drop again a little bit. We're going to start to see an increase. So
I'm trying to put on new pressure. It's just-
No, it's
I mean, your frustrations are shared by all of us, I'm certain.
The 31st will give us a chance to get that first projection from the state.
meet with the county and
Give
meet
us
with
a
leadership,
start.
and we can, yes.
And we're already doing our leadership meetings, so we know what we are personnel wise, it's just a reminder that about 80% of our general fund budget's personnel. It's salary and benefits, so.
And to your point also, we're supposed to present the county council on May 12th. And if that's the time that we anticipate wanting to ask for any increases, they would want to know, actually, they want us to give them a draft before their council administrator budget retreat on April 25th.
Look at what we have.
Right, so we usually give them a draft because we
We
haven't.
don't have our budget,
Right.
you and I sat in a finance meeting, it's a CR, you don't have it, so. It's a continuing resolution for your previous year's budget,
So you said on the 12th, that's when we present?
May 12th.
May 12th.
What about, what time?
Usually it's 4 o'clock.
Yeah, they let us go first because we
Yeah,
usually have.
okay.
a board meeting.
So we'll, so this evening, we present the calendar under the finance, section of the agenda tonight, under the superintendent's report of finance. We'll change the 10th to the 31st. Okay. Oh, here's a copy of the calendars.
Thank you. Jim?
Paper.
I couldn't on paper.
Okay, so, and then moving on from that, we will have, another board workshop and public input in the board workshop on the 28th. Presenting the county council, and then our public hearing and budget presentation will be on May 19th. And we hope to have approval of the budget on June 9th. And then there's a period in there from the 16th to the 30th, if there's any legislative changes at the state level, if we need to make any changes. And then we will roll with it. That's really all we have to present to you tonight, but if you have any questions, we're more than happy.
Did we cover under the other dates that first one with the county council?
It's with the county staff, to get our projections on what they feel revenues will be from property taxes.
If it's TBD, we can.
I don't know that yet. No, I've reached out to them a couple of times and they haven't set that up, so reach back out.
Okay.
Tomorrow. Another, revenue line item that's not necessarily general fund, but also for revenues, we're discussing the food service revenues. We have an RFP that is about to be presented. We sent it to the State Department. They had a couple of pointed questions for us before we could issue our RFP. The biggest question is about the you have the right exact word a little while ago when we were talking, the higher nutritional value.
Yeah, you all need to be comfortable and make a decision on if we go with a higher nutritional value, then that's going to increase lunch prices for students. So, I mean, again, there is there's a formula they utilize and we can't just simply eat into our cash to do that because that's a recurring cost.
But what about our food service?
That's what I was
All
gonna say,
that
our food
excess.
service, like
Yeah,
we have
that's what we're
excess
talking about.
every year.
You're saying we can't eat into that?
You shouldn't eat into your cash balance, but I'm just saying, even with that, you're gonna have to raise, because what you'll do is you'll collapse down your cash reserves in the food service fund. You don't wanna.
So we're going to see how much
Yeah.
we would be.
Yeah, I just- yeah.
Raising it, and can we absorb any of it?
Oh, yeah.
Like a portion of it,
Okay,
that's what I
so
would like.
like, how much is total and then how much we can absorb and where that would
Yeah.
leave us?
It's for the
Okay.
RFP, so when
Yeah.
it goes out, we just need
I
to
mean,
we need to
but-
realize it's gonna come back, the proposals will come back with the
But-
increased cost.
okay, but can we then change that if we decide the cost is too much for our student? Or do we have to stick with it? Like, once we see those numbers?
So if we say that we are asking for an increased nutritional value, then every vendor will come back with that
Right.
price per meal. And we
But
can't
then if we
negotiate that
say-
piece.
We can,
We can't ask for both. We can't,
Yeah, we can ask for both.
yeah.
why can't we
Why
ask for
can't-
both or
You can't ask for tiered pricing. It has to
That's
be,
right.
has to be a fixed
So
price per
Can
meal.
we just, so then could we just, if they're all too high, just reject it and then we'll start it, I mean, do you see what I'm saying?
Right.
I'm just worried more about.
What's our time?
There's not enough time to do that.
Okay.
So we started with the template that the state gave us and we asked if we could do this tiered pricing for just that.
All over.
And they said no.
It's ridiculous. Why would you not want to know how it's gonna affect students? Like, I mean, if it's like a dollar increase, that could be substantial to families, or it's like
That was my
a 10-cent increase, like, okay.
But how do you
like-
even make a decision if you don't know? Us, I mean.
Yeah,
how
I
do
know,
we
that's what I
make a
mean, like, hey,
decision?
blindly just,
The only other thing that
See,
we
that makes
could do is add it as an à la carte menu item, but à la carte means that you would pay separately. The students would have to pay separately for that option.
and there's no way, like, I just remember, like, we had a substantial surplus in our food service balance. And I know we used it to purchase equipment, but like, it was a continual thing. And the last thing I want to do is be making money on nutrition. So I'm not against investing that into our students. I definitely don't want to do that though, if it's going to still come at a substantial cost to them. The idea was going at the higher nutritional value because we had such a large surplus. So we would likely be able to cover the majority of that. But like with shooting in the dark, I don't know like how you even,
We just don't know.
like, I mean,
The only other thing that we could do is the possibility of asking for the fixed, it would still have to be fixed price per meal. But typically with these contracts, you can do annual up to 5 years. So if we accepted
One of them.
one
Well, another
year
one, you got
and
it.
then decided that that was not going
Too
to,
expensive.
right.
could we have the fixed price per meal and negotiate who's willing to offer the best quality product for that like price? You know what I'm saying? Like, is the higher nutritional thing just come, does that make sense? Like,
Unfortunately, the state says it's a fixed cost per meal.
so
What-
like,
What the vendor would charge us.
like
or-
one vendor doesn't provide a higher quality for that fixed cost per meal than another vendor might. Like maybe another vendor is willing to eat some of their profit margin to provide a higher quality project or product at the per cost per.
So
Does
Rhonda
that make
helped
sense?
us with the RFP. So do you want to add something, Rhonda? Sorry.
We have to, the State Department is one that creates a template for this RFP. So we basically just have to input our information. And what the State Department is stating is that we have to have a direction. So when we tell them the nutritional value that we'd like to have, I mean, there obviously is a standard, but if we're asking them to go above the standard, we have to put that in the specs. And there's no, like Tina said, we could negotiate, but once you have it in the specs and everybody is bidding on that same thing.
So you can't ask them to go, so can you just ask them to go above the standard on the price that we currently were at? And just go with the one who's willing to provide the best?
It has to be an apples to apples. So if you, I don't think the state would allow us to do that, but that would be their interpretation of what is higher value.
So we
It'd
have to
be-
use the state's.
We do, yes, ma'am. And so they're asking us just, we have to be specific. We can't just, start picking and choosing.
Do we have any idea what type of, I mean, can they, before, I guess, is there any way to get information about what the potential cost increase would be, like, before we decide which one we want to ask for? Does that make sense? Like, before we decide on if we want to go with the higher nutritional or not, can we find out an average of what the cost increase is per student? Is that, you see what I'm asking? Is there?
If you guys are okay, the only
Yes.
thing I would suggest is you ask the current vendor
Yeah.
if they're willing to give you,
Just
that-
say like, okay, it'll cost, it's usually an average of $5 a meal, it's usually an average of 50 cents a meal. Like, we could just ask them for that information.
if they're willing to give that.
Okay.
Foundational questions. So our current contract runs out when?
June 30th.
June 30th. So we're running up against trying to get a contract in place for the next school year, which is only months away. Number two, I'm not part of state procurement, but I've spent a lot of time with them. I find it odd that the suppliers are the ones dictating how you can go to market. So fundamental questions for the rest of the board members, what must we do and what do we want to do as a district? Are we just want to provide the bare minimum nutritional value? Or is it our standard, is our desire to do more nutritional value, less waste and whatnot? Third is it possible to ask for them to provide, yes, I understand that maybe you're required to do a price per meal, right? Give us price per meal for the bare minimum. Also give me a proposal that says, I challenge the procurement to come and explain to me how it is. We have procurement provisions in state law that allow you to do sole source stuff. So that you can't go ask all the invitees to bid on this and give us a price for both. And furthermore, why couldn't we say, you know what, in exchange for a 3-year contract, what price would you provide versus a 1-year renewable
There's no
contract?
negotiation.
It gives them more stability and provides them the ability, if they want to go after our contract. It's in their best interest. And these are just basic questions that, could be asked. And I've been through a number of procurements with the state. Okay, what are our requirements? I understand we have state law and procurement law we have to follow, but the requirements are DD2's requirements. They're not the state's.
So that's my understanding of speaking with previous people in that food service is that you can request also just a higher quality at that price per meal. And the vendor can then decide to provide that higher quality at a lower price too. If they want to be competitive for your business. My understanding. I don't from
So when we say higher
Conversations with-
quality, do we have to have a specific wording in there?
a higher nutritional value.
You're asking, so you have to explain what that is. So for the whole muscle chicken,
Yes.
perhaps,
Yeah.
you would have to tell them that is what you're looking for, because otherwise it's going to be up to each individual
Yes.
vendor to interpret what you're asking for.
So can we get that verbiage, maybe speak with some people that are in the food service industry that could give us some ideas of some specifics to ask for? Because I know that when we had meetings with Sodexo in the past, and I've talked to their corporate offices, they said that that is a power we have, is to, here's the state standard of requirement, XYZ type of chicken. But you then can specify, no, we would like the whole muscle chicken instead of XYZ type of bread or whatever, we would like this. And then they can then decide, yes, we can give that to you at that price per meal, or this would be, the cost for that.
So if you put that in the specifications that you want, you know, the whole muscle chicken, then your fixed price per meal will reflect that type of menu. But once you have it, you can't take it back.
Can you not request that those specifications come at a specific price per meal?
That's the
No,
purpose of
That's
the
what you
RFP.
said, right? So you're, they give you their best price. So each vendor is giving you their best price for the
We
same.
have a highly competitive like, I think there's a lot of people that would love to have our district's business, so I don't. While I don't want our students to eat the cost, I also believe that if we were to set the standard higher, there will be competitive bids.
So if we did it just for the 1 year, like we were saying,
If you do it.
I mean, could we, if the cost came back too much for our students, could we eat the cost for 1 year?
We
Because it
paid
wouldn't
the
be
cost for one.
recurring.
We got about a little over $3 million,
If they want to
But-
keep our.
but.
Or at least eat it enough to the point that we felt, I mean, I just don't want to put our kids in a position where they, or their families, that they can't buy food.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the last thing. I don't think any of us want that, but I also agree that we definitely feel like it's important to increase the nutritional value. I mean, we've all said that. So we're kind of between a rock and a hard place. It's not knowing is my point. Like if
Yeah.
it's outrageous and people
Yeah.
can eat it all, well, then I guess you'd rather
And that, what's the point of a higher nutritional
If you have
value if you
kids.
can't afford it? Yeah.
agreed.
Our current Does it have any extension provisions available?
I knew a district who asked for 1 more year extension during COVID years, but I don't know about, now.
You have to go back to the State Department of Education and ask, because typically it should go no longer than 5 years. And like I said, we're on our 5th year now.
The difference is this is a food service management contract and versus us buying from a vendor. We used to be in-house and we went to this because we were losing so much money.
But it's a contract between DD2 and the food service provider, or
That has to be approved by the State Department.
it has to be approved by
Yeah.
the state? But the contract is not between the state and the food service provider.
State actually signs off on the contract as well every year. So they approve the final RFP before we issue it, and then they approve the final contract. They don't necessarily get into the fixed price, so we accept
The
it.
contract. And a big portion of that, I think, is because it's a federally funded program. And there are certain things that we have to do, to get federal funding, which impacts our students that are on free and reduced lunch. Is there any way that you can put in the RFP, give us your best price for a 1 year contract, for a 3 year contract? And still the same, nutritional content that we're looking for, but that gives them a chance to say, all right, for a 1 year contract, this is what the cost point would be. For a 3 year contract, if you go with this for 3 years, this is what the price point would be.
Part of the complication of doing that is on the anniversary, they go by the CPI index. So like for us, it's gonna be March. So they're gonna look at last year, like next year, they're gonna look at what March CPI index was. And they're going to come out and tell the school districts, this is what you have. So not knowing what that CPI index is going to be, I don't think the vendors are going to be able to provide that. And I'm not sure that the RFP, and certainly can check, but I'm not sure if the RFP is structured to do more than 1 year at a time because the state has to see it every single year.
Will it not be end up on a 5 year contract with Sodexo?
I thought it was 3 and then you.
We have the option to end it after every contract term, which is 1 year. And then we can go up to 4 renewals, taking it to be 5 completely.
I don't
But
remember voting day.
It would benefit a company. They're going to be providing personnel and everything and hiring them for a contract. So I think it would scare many of them to tell them you only are thinking of 1 year, because they're going to invest quite a bit to, fulfill this contract.
So let's talk best and worst case scenario. Worst case scenario is it's just not for whatsoever. And we have to figure out what a provision is to stay for an emergency renewal for 1 year, because we have to have food service. best case scenario is it comes back and maybe it's a little high and we see if we can't fund part of it through our reserves. But having a model that shows where that could put us. Now, I understand the equipment piece. And again, I've been through this quite a bit with food service. And so what I typically try to do is anytime there's a renovation project, I try to build in food service equipment into that project to try to protect the food service fund. And so you can do that out of capital expenditures. I've also had times where I use some of the food service fund because it's so high, to offset the building project if I was close, but more times than not, I do it the other way around. So, I mean, yes, we're worried about our equipment and replacing our equipment. Worst case scenario is we figure out if something happens and we use 8% money, for our CIP plan, for equipment. But we got to make a, decision, and we're at their mercy a little bit of not knowing what the price is going to come back at. So I think that's your best and your worst case scenarios. And then,
Do we know of any school districts that currently use the higher nutritional value model? Because, we could look at what they're paying,
Yeah.
their students are paying.
certainly no, I
I
mean,
wonder if we could find that out. I feel like we could. I'm
Yeah.
sure there are some across the state that do. Looks like maybe Green, I don't know. I mean, I
No,
guess.
Greenville outsources theirs. Well, it was
They are-
in-house, but now they utilize School Food Rocks, which was started in-house. I think now that became an
I
out.
guarantee you there's somebody.
Yeah, well, it was in-house, and I think the in-house person went and started a own company
For them.
essentially, yes.
And somebody would let them know.
Because they were phenomenal.
I worry that if we try to reach out to the FSMCs, that they're gonna be like, we're getting ready to bid on this and we don't want to give you our, our numbers before the solicitation, but. I don't know
The school
who
districts?
did,
No, the school, I'm just saying what the students currently pay. Like,
Yeah,
if
yeah.
they got, we could just look
They
at
look it up on their website.
Yes, you could look it up, but just it's a matter of knowing who has a
Dude,
higher
that's what I'm
nutritional
saying.
value.
does the food service department in the state, they know? Yeah.
I mean, they would be able to know
Wish we could.
from the contracts that they're seeing each year. I don't really know if they could turn around and tell you whether those particular school districts are serving, above and beyond the requirements of the nutritional values.
I will do that, so we can research, we can try to research, because I agree, it seems like we could.
Yeah,
So would that be, if we were trying to go directions that the higher nutritional value means whole muscle chicken? That would be the avenue that we would
I
want to
think-
specify, because like Rhonda said, we don't want to leave that up to.
I think
this
we need to
vendor
do a little
needs
research
This.
on like more than just the whole muscle chicken. Like, I think that needs to be an offering in addition to, but obviously there's probably other things we have to address, not just one chicken sandwich. You know what I mean? There might be other, if we have to get into specificities, like, I think we need to make sure that we're researching, finding out what are those? So like, maybe with cheeseburgers, it's a type of,
So you have to
different levels.
each
of- I don't
Piece of food, you can't just say it
Yeah.
overall.
So you have to, not like each piece of food, but maybe general, because I think it has to go back to like what we were talking about with Larry when we initially, how they purchased the chicken.
Yeah.
Because they have to then think
But would
about how
that
they
only
break up the
increase
chicken.
the cost of the chicken meal or increases all the food?
Well, for like the whole muscle chicken, they'll now need a lot more chickens because you get less whole muscles out of the
Yeah.
amount of chicken. So like maybe if it's a different type of cut beef, they're gonna have to purchase more cows.
But I'm saying, does it
I-
increase, if you specify the whole muscle chicken, does it increase all of the food costs?
Yeah.
Yes, everything,
It's the.
just for all the meals, even breakfast.
So right now, I think Sodexo is providing, they're gonna average their additional expenditures.
Oh, across the
Their
whole
meal
meal.
thing.
I see.
They'll determine what their
Decide.
total additional expenditures.
They're not just gonna charge you more for chicken.
No.
Oh, no.
They'll average,
Sorry.
they'll average the increase, yes, yes, per meal. But
I see.
you do, but it's each.
I
size.
see, I see, yeah.
Is higher nutritional value, is that defined term anywhere or? is
No.
that-
I know, like.
No, you literally have to that's what I'm saying. It's just crazy. You have to go in and pick which. They don't call it higher.
Why is it
nutritional
high?
value.
Yes.
They're calling it higher nutritional
Okay.
value because it's above the required nutritional specifications.
It's just a better
It's
quality
above
meat
the.
or cut or whatever.
Requires nutrition.
ground up leftovers of something that make up, it sounds horrible, but you know, like you can make a chicken patty out of several different cuts of, you know, chicken and that, or you can make a chicken breast sandwich out of like just that part. And then obviously,
The other pieces and parts make up.
Yes.
The
Something
specs
like
that
that,
the
yes.
state says is allowed.
yes.
Works.
So I don't want to think the higher nutritional value as much as it's just a higher quality product,
I understand.
in my
Different.
State procurement has come back. They have questions for us on our requirements for the RFP.
Yes.
What are they thinking of in terms of a solicitation? So current contract runs out the end of June. School starts up again in August. Okay,
Yes.
so we've got an entire 1 month to get through negotiations and any other things to close a contract, assuming, what's the timeline that the state procurement is planning on using to run this solicitation?
So the solicitation has to be issued by us, but they have the template that we follow and then they approve what we're going to issue out for the RFP. But depending, the RFP is, I'd say probably 98% complete and ready to go for the exception of a couple questions, this being one of them, about the food specifications. So once we get that out, I think our hope was to be able to recommend to the board in April, end of April.
The first meeting, in April. We don't have another meeting, in April, do we? Is it- Oh, in March, sorry.
There are 2 meetings in April. 1 meeting in March, 2 meetings in April.
So all that negotiation would take place between the school district and the awarded vendor or the vendor that we plan to recommend. Then at that point, that's whenever the awarded vendor would then begin to work with our current vendor, if it's different, to go into a transition plan. So both July 1 is when the new contract will begin, and then our current contract ends June 30th. So we're not waiting until June 30th to actually enter into a contract. So it's gonna happen.
So we have some time.
Notwithstanding state procurement's approval of the RFP that we want to issue. When are we targeting release and how long for responses to come back?
I think the hope was to have it released this week. But it really depended on how you guys felt about specification.
Then the evaluation committee would meet, and then the recommendation would come to the superintendent, who will bring it to the board. It originally said the 14th, but we could do the 28th of April, because they can't really take over or continue officially until July 1. So it's not like they can come in early if it's change. So that would give
But that gives
2 full months.
us more time to negotiate.
That you mean, or after we get the,
After we get the responses. Yeah.
I don't know, a lot of negotiating with the fixed price, you know, looking at Rhonda.
There'll be some discussion.
Yeah.
There'll still be some discussion. Like,
So it's still definitely doable. We can find out some other districts perhaps.
I'll take, we do that. Nearly everything else, but food service is different. It's federally funded.
I'm not trying to be overly inquisitive. Just for your awareness, this is what I do for a living. Okay, so when I ask about when's it gonna be released, how long are we gonna give the prospective respondents time to send back hopefully a carefully thought out proposal and nothing? It gives us time to consume it, figure out what we need to negotiate, what questions do we have, and then I understand the effective date of any contract won't be until July 1st.
It has to be out in 21 days, for 21 days.
Yeah, that's part of the solicitation.
It's part of what the state requires, that it has to be out for 21 days.
I can't think we'll get more than 3, maybe 4
It's,
bids.
you would probably have their base, ready to send to us, just
They
sharpen
know.
the pencils to
They already
figure out
know.
exactly how much.
Do they not know?
So even if you're saying with that much, I mean, I know you already answered this, it just seems like there would be enough time then if there's only 3 or 4, and then they would come back, you say it's too high, okay, none of them, then come back with the shorter one. I mean, we still have. Just like, it seems like it could be enough time. that like the total off the table idea?
I don't.
Yeah,
think
I
so.
mean, we can see
Because
what
here's the
they
thing,
send
that
back for their prices.
If,
Might be fine.
if it is a different vendor, then the challenge for them is not, it's not the equipment, it's not any of that. It's making sure that they have employees for the facilities. Now, more than likely, unless there's a no compete with these Sodexo employees and with somebody else, then, it's probably gonna be a lot of the employees that are already in that position. They won't, because Sodexo won't have jobs for them. So, I mean, it's their personnel and, they have to go through, their specific company's training if they're migrating over, but it can be done. I still think it can be done.
I feel like we're a sought after district and I feel like it's very well known that we expect a high quality product. So I think people would be willing to compete for that. In my opinion. Just-
So I think what we can do first thing tomorrow is ask for what is the specific wording that they would require, do you think, Rhonda? From the state position?
Yes, ma'am, but I guess my other question to the board is, are we wanting to do something beyond chicken? Is,
I'd have to research what those options are. Honestly, it's full transparency. I know I've had conversations about that. I remember the whole muscle chicken because I specifically requested that, like, when we were talking with.
Is there like a menu?
well, and that's my thing, so we can't, if we add that in there, that's great and dandy, but if we're wanting to add more items and it's gonna take research, I don't know.
I mean, I think
They-
there are some calls I can make to find out what the
Well,
different levels of standard are. To just get maybe some specifics, but I want to be able to go down, like, I want to be able to offer you like a plethora. It'd probably be like maybe 3 to 5 different things that we could request to increase the quality, apart from the whole muscle chicken, but I don't know that I
You said that.
Well, I mean, if
like,
they
I don't
don't,
speak food service language.
I'm surprised that they don't have something like that already, but if they don't, then I think what you could do is look at the entree protein component of a meal. That's the main part of your meal. You're not gonna change.
Mostly the meats, quality of meats, the cut of meat, what are you getting out of, each.
Like a meat package?
Yeah. Like, again, like, if you use the, like. I don't know.
Okay.
Can we say higher quality meat package?
Gonna argue with that.
Better cuts of beef and better cuts of chicken, can we just say that? Not ground up. Stuff, that's all. I'd have to look.
Completely step out of our
Sorry.
expertise.
Yeah, I obviously, it's kind of surprising that there's not
I
some.
feel like there should be like a table, like, of like, this is the types of chicken.
Yes.
Nuggets versus these types of chicken nuggets,
Tier.
I have not seen that before.
Well,
maybe it exists.
Yeah, I have no idea.
I'll use AI and Google tonight. I don't know. I wish I had a better answer. I know we're
Yeah,
just
sorry, that's.
trying. First, she's probably like, these people aren't.
And I wish our procurement officer, could have joined us, tonight, so I apologize, that's why I can't spout off dates, but, are we also, probably something else she'll need to know is, are you looking to do this K-12?
Oh, you mean like the better quality, higher quality? Well, I know like what were we doing currently? The whole muscle chicken was like, is it middle and high or just high school?
Those guys, you guys.
I mean, I would definitely like to extend that down to middle. I don't think elementary school kids really like love a big old chicken sandwich, the same
Like
way,
that.
like, they're more nuggets. So a higher quality nugget, whatever verbiage that would be, for the little ones. I just don't know. I'm sorry. That's like.
But it's also hard to say that we only want higher quality.
No, I'm saying like a higher
Middle and high
quality.
school
You have
kids.
to think about what they eat though. So
I
like
understand.
a higher quality nugget versus a higher quality chicken sandwich. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want them to have the low quality bottom of the mill nugget, but they love nuggets. So maybe there's like a
The
higher.
required nutritional specifications.
Okay.
Low quality.
My bad, sorry. The required, I'd like to
I mean,
go
does it
above and
break it
beyond.
down to that level that you have to choose nuggets or sandwich?
I mean, whole muscle meat. Didn't you say you had to specify that? Yes. Because really, they just assume most districts are just gonna go with the state recommendations, correct? The standard, there's a standard. It's not that you can't negotiate above the standard,
Sure, no,
but then that's when you start having to
Feels like
know
it's just like-
what you're talking about, which we know.
Yeah.
And we just want every vendor to be able to provide their best price for like Ron said, apples to apples, so that
Like, not this type of chicken.
All that's.
we're trying to avoid
That's gross.
anyone coming back and saying that we didn't give them an opportunity, a fair opportunity.
So instead of that, different, higher quality cut. Do you know, that's what I'm in my brain. I just don't know how to verbalize.
Yeah, I.
Not saying that that's.
I wish that they had. It was as simple as a tier.
Yeah, that's kind of what
I
I.
went to a couple of their
Like,
sites.
There might be. Our phone calls, which I can't make at this moment.
No, but we can make those phone calls.
And there's gotta be somebody who knows what those
I mean,
stand.
it's got, you shouldn't have to pick out each.
You will, but there's people that can at least tell you what those tiers are, like, or what to ask for. Like, I knew to ask for the whole muscle chicken because I had that conversation specifically around chicken sandwiches. So like those patties that are blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I said that was my concern. So I said, what could I ask for? And then that was provided to me. I didn't do that with every other aspect of.
Piece of meat.
Yes, because, so I'm assuming I could ask those same questions and get an answer with other types of meat. Don't know. The only reason I knew how to ask for that. I wouldn't have known
Well,
that.
let's go back to something that you all brought up. I think that if this doesn't come out the way we want it, we have time to reissue an RFP and still be okay. Be tight. but we can do it.
I think with so many kids who rely on school meals as their sole source of nutrition, I want it to be above the minimum standard. I'm not saying the minimum standard is bad, but like, that's so important to me. Nutrition is like essential to these kids' ability to learn and focus so that's important, but I also don't ever want to put an undue cost on our parents that, you know, maybe
Yeah.
already
Haven't
struggling.
increased
So,
meal prices in many, many years, so we could look at that as well and see how we compare with other
districts. Yeah.
and with a small increase.
And then does that
Yes, I
affect,
think
that doesn't,
that increase is reasonable. We just don't want it to be something out.
does that affect the free and reduced lunch? And if our price is higher, could more people qualify for it based on their income? Like, let's say like, if it's, I don't know, like $2, maybe less people qualify for that, or does it matter? Is it just a standard income no matter what?
Yeah, I think it's just, if it doesn't, I mean, it's
So,
so much more.
so it has nothing to do, so they're still gonna get it regardless of if we increase our price, A, and B, more people aren't gonna
But
qualify.
then the
for it.
reduced cost would still be more to that.
Yes.
So you have to think, the free, it wouldn't be
Yes.
affected, but the reduced cost kids, their
Still
cost
be
will
more.
increase as well as kids who pay.
So any decision as to whether or not we use our food service reserves to cover any increase in costs or not, is that separate or part of our annual budget?
I don't know how much we'd be able to use out of food service balances, if it's USDA money. What was that wording that we had today, Rhonda, about not being, or was Dr. Wilson? Yeah, we can't supplant using federal dollars.
What was most of
Make
our
up for
reserve?
that.
Because I feel like it was continually growing each year, so.
So we had some savings during COVID years because the state was covering the full costs. No one had to pay anything. We also had some grants for, looking back at Dr. Wilson, because we worked on this for a few years together. Supply chain assistance money.
Yes.
So that's a
Yeah.
grant. Would not be able to use that to.
But there was
Made a
like
difference.
a portion that was still like a continued savings or extra.
And we had said we were gonna use that for equipment, like Dr. Roberts was talking about, so. We just don't want to use that as a recurring dollars every year because we'll run out.
Because it is declining.
Well, that's what I was wondering. I was wondering like what percentage of that is recurring every year? Like how much of that is money that we're still coming out on top every year regardless? Does that make sense of those COVID
I pulled up your,
grants?
your food
That's what I was
service.
just getting ready to look for, yeah.
And then is that potentially enough to even make a dent in the added cost per meal? I'm not, again, like, I definitely don't want to hurt that, but if I would love to see us like just even out that. and not.
But, and we do want to keep some in there, like we were saying,
Yeah, so
for
it's-
rainy days, in case there's ever a freeze on federal dollars that come down.
Yeah, yeah.
So from the beginning of this year until the end of this year, our fund balance will go down.
That was, that's we
$1.8
bought all those, that equipment,
equipment.
yes. I was just wondering, again, how much was,
Yeah, I can look that up.
like, how much of that? Because I know we spent some of that money. Some of it was one-time money savings that we got from the grants. Right. Some of it is recurring savings that we're, because we're still not spending as much as we have, right?
But we're trying to force that issue a little bit because when, as I understand it, I know Dr. Wilson, you're back there, when we decided to outsource and go with a food service management company, I feel like what I have read, what I've learned is a lot of the savings has come from a reduction in staff that they employ. Therefore, their charge to us is a little bit less because they don't employ as many people. So that's a little slippery slope, you know, because we need staffed better in our cafeterias.
You'd hire more
And
for food service monitors.
we force them, force them.
And they take their kid out of that.
So, you know, that was part of it. There's 3 million plus in there right now, but that's going down.
Right. Well, we don't want to be at zero.
I definitely don't want to put a recurring cost over like one-time money, by any means, but, I do know that there was recurring additional revenue that was kind of pretty consistent in there that was left over. Obviously, I don't want to tap into that, so we can't deal with like equipment issues as needed. So it's like weighing that, like how much reserve do we have in addition to, you know, making sure we're balancing, having enough money for capital improvement needs while still not profiting.
Yeah, and like I said, I think we can lower it, progressively lower that number by building our equipment needs into our renovation projects and, you know, obviously new construction. So that you don't need as much sitting there if you have, you know, you have a freezer go out, you have those things are really expensive, but as long as you got enough to cover a couple of those, they're not all gonna go out at once. So that's what I'm saying. If it's not built into that, then we build it into our CIP.
How many schools do we currently have who are all get complete free? I know we have 7.
We need to read
that.
We have to recalculate to see if any others would be eligible.
They think there
Get
might
those
be
numbers
more.
in April.
Right.
So
So I
that's
mean,
what I was thinking.
because we have a substantial number. None of our high schools though, that's.
I'm
new.
surprised.
Yeah, they're so big. I was, because they're so large, but so that would be good information for us to
Yeah.
revisit, just to look at how many, I know it's.
Could we know that's like soon?
We don't have those updated numbers from the state yet. They usually say April.
So we don't know what that's gonna look like at all next year.
Why do we always do this?
Well, that would be helpful information.
Yeah, yeah.
See if we can grab some people from the state department next week. at a Conference, just to see. if they-
Yeah. Keep us posted.
Shake it down.
And probably created way more confusion. than-
No, and you're going to find out because we know that y'all had some.
That's why we're talking.
Very passionate feelings about
Yeah.
chicken and chicken
But
and meat.
We want to make sure that we captured what your desire was when we go into this new RFP, and we didn't want the vendors to think that anyone had an unfair advantage over anyone else. We don't want that.
Meetings, we want high quality food
That's
at a
right.
cheap price. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Check.
Okay, we will
Sorry, we had
report
that.
back so that we can.
Yeah, anything else? Anybody have to bring up or? Yeah, probably just a question, I guess, for, as far as like the new $50,000 starting salaries, how's that fit in the budget? You think, or?
Well, right now, the Ways and Means has said that, they were only going to provide funding from 47 to 48.5.
So we get no money.
It's not.
I mean,
Yeah, we,
but like if you had to kind of guess, like, how's it,
it is, but we still.
is it, so you get to be able to swing it or?
That 1,500.
To get to 50?
Yeah.
Yes, because we're at 49 now,
Okay.
yes.
And then,
above
It
that.
would- they
So it would
only-
cover that, you're saying.
So they fund to 47 right now.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, so if they raise the state minimum to 48.5
Fund
and
us to 48.
our starting's 49.
Yeah,
So-
that's the local input to get us to 49.5. So now they'll fund us from 47 to 48.5. And then if we go ahead and do the 1,500, that will put us at.
Okay, well, that's good at least.
I don't get the whole 1,500,
No.
but
That's what I,
It's 70, what,
we'll
70?
get a portion, even
Okay.
going from 47.
And we're at the ever arms race, so I guess if you can put back the number, I think what would it be if we get those 51, 52, or 53?
Yeah.
We will.
Yeah,
Okay. That make that priority.
about $3.6 million for every $1,000.
Okay.
In calculating it.
But yes, yeah, that's kind of our, one of our more goals that we're trying to have those numbers. And then we have any other public comments? Okay, so I guess
To adjourn.
you got a second?
And then
Okay, adjourn.
Thank y'all.